Good morning. It brings me great joy to be with you all today in this season of Christmas as we journey with the Magi toward the Star of Epiphany. This is a bit of a departure for me standing before you today. While you'll see me listed in your bulletin as one of Riverside's ordained ministers, more often than not on Sunday mornings, instead of being seated up here along with the rest of our clergy, you'll find me in the very back of the nave, where Marvin and the other ushers can keep an eye on me. You may not be aware, but there is an entire community outside our walls that joins us for worship every week over live stream and Facebook and even Twitter. And so most Sundays, rather than putting on a robe and stole, my role as clergy at the Riverside Church is carried out using my cell phone and a laptop as I capture moments of our worshiping life together and live tweet our sermons. But as talented as I am at multitasking, I don't think I'll be able to pull off that feat today, so I'll leave the tweeting to others. FYI, our handle is @RiversideNYC, #SundaySermon. With that, let us pray. Oh God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable to you, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. It happened an eternity ago, and as recently as my last breath. It was a moment on which all of time hangs, and yet another unremarkable event. It was the spark that meant everything to us, and the cosmology in which our existence is ultimately fairly meaningless. We've all experienced time in this way, haven't we? When the eternally significant and the fleetingly mundane collide. If you've been sitting around my family's table on Christmas Eve, you would have heard me tell the story of my college misadventures in astronomy. Needing to fulfill some basic math and science credits before I could plunge myself headfirst into the humanities, in my first year of college, I faithfully signed up for Astronomy 101. I thought learning about the universe would be interesting. After sweating through every single quiz and test the entire semester, nothing brought me more joy than finishing the final exam and going straight to the university bookstore where I sold back that textbook. I was so grateful I would never have to put myself through that pain again. That was until the next semester when I found myself thoroughly out of options and enrolled in Astronomy 102. And to add insult to injury, I was forced to buy back that exact same textbook. That's why it's so ironic that earlier this week, for a second time in my life, I found myself wishing I had kept that astronomy book. You see, there was something about the Big Bang that I wanted to know. This week, as I was reading the opening verses of John's Gospel, my mind flashed to one of those astronomy lectures on the origins of the universe. These are memories I've tried very, very hard to forget, so naturally they come back a little fuzzy. But I remember my professor describing different theories of how the universe began and how it's now expanding. Frankly, he was a pretty dull guy who obviously did not want to be teaching Astronomy 102. But I remember his voice coming alive with wonder as he tried to describe to us the fragments of evidence scattered across the cosmos that physicists are now trying to piece together to tell the story of our origins. You see, the particles that were there at the very beginning of existence are still traveling through space. And in some way that has to do with time and the speed of light and the bend of the universe, those very protoparticles are raining down around us, even as we sit here. In effect, humans can detect the spark of all creation that happened 13.8 billion years ago, right here, right now. At least that's what I think I remember learning. And suddenly the Big Bang helped me understand the Gospel of John. Or maybe the Gospel of John helped me finally understand something about the Big Bang. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory. Physicists today and the author of John hold this conviction in common, that what happened out there in the beginning is also happening here among us on this tiny ball of dirt hidden in this unremarkable solar system. It all happened an eternity ago, and as recently as my last breath. As we know, the opening verses of the Gospel of John are unique when compared to the other Gospels. Scholars believe that John is the last of the canonical Gospels written approximately 60 years or so after the events that it recounts. This would be like any one of us leaving here today and writing a new book on the civil rights movement. This means that by the time John sits down to write, the story is out there. It's known. And so he can step back and take the long view. He can think less literally and more metaphysically. Rather than starting from the perspective of a Galilean hillside or a dingy barn floor, John starts, well, in the beginning of all things. Drawing parallels to Lady Wisdom in Proverbs and incorporating the leading philosophies of his day, more than any other gospel, John wants to connect what happened here in a remote corner of a remote planet with the story of the entire cosmos. This Word that was in the beginning with God and was God also became flesh and sinew and bone, just like you and me. And he walked among us. John focuses less on what happened to this man, Jesus from Nazareth in the Galilee, and instead begins to craft language on why his existence is so significant. It's little surprise, then, that the result is a beautiful prologue of theological poetry. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him, not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There's a reason we recite these words year after year. John has given us a theological framework to wrestle with life's greatest challenges and still hold on to hope. When life is viewed from the perspective of the eternal, from the vantage point of the cosmos, we can seem pretty insignificant, can't we? What are our concerns compared to the birthing of stars? John's response is to assure us that the Word that existed with God at the beginning of time is also the man Jesus who walked among us. We matter to the cosmos because we matter to him. mattered enough for the Word itself to become flesh. He is the light that shines in our darkest moments of doubt and despair. And despite crucifixion and death and deportations and cancer and even Donald Trump, the darkness has not overcome it. This is a word I need to hear this Christmas. It's a word our world needs to hear. The more I reflect on the decisions I made as an undergrad, the more I am forced to acknowledge that I really wasn't very bright. In addition to my misadventures in astronomy, early in my college career, I decided the best way to fulfill my language requirements was to take ancient Greek. Mind you, I had zero intention of going to seminary at the time. That was the furthest thing from my mind. So I really can't tell you what I was thinking. But I committed and stuck with ancient Greek for 4 semesters. I still remember when we started translating the Gospel of John in class. We came to that verse, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it." And that's when I discovered for the first time that the word overcome could be translated another way. In addition to that meaning, apparently it could also mean comprehend or perceive, as in the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not perceive it. And if you continue reading John's prologue, this translation almost seems to fit better. After all, it's only a few verses later that John writes, "He was in the world, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not perceive it." Now, I trust the New Testament scholars who translated the Greek vastly more than I do my own novice abilities. But it does seem that a charge can be laid against them, that when they decided that the darkness did not overcome the light, when they made that translation decision, they were opting for the warm, hope-filled version over the harsher but perhaps more contextually appropriate one. I mean, is there really proof that the darkness has not overcome the light? Empirically, that may be a hard case to make. Just here in our country, Islamophobia is at an all-time high. So much so that the leading candidate for one of our major political parties feels comfortable enough to call for an outright ban on Muslims traveling to the United States, including our own citizens. In a year where there have been more mass shootings than days in the year, more Americans are in favor of increasing accessibility to guns than greater gun control. And even as we see Black Lives Matter grow and spread across our country, we continue to see no accountability for our nation's ongoing assault on Black and brown bodies, and systems of injustice appear impervious to change. No disrespect to those Greek scholars, but surely the only explanation for our failure to fall on our knees and bear fruits worthy of repentance is that the light has shined in the darkness, and we have not perceived it. And yet, I keep coming back to this theme in John's prologue. This theme that the seemingly insignificant is significant. The fate of the entire cosmos can hinge on a tiny speck of a planet, and the word of creation can be contained in the flesh of a newborn baby. If this is really true, then Could there be events happening around us now where the eternally significant is being expressed in the smallest of acts? Is the birth of the Christ child a one-time event? Or, like the particles of the Big Bang, is it happening all around us, even here, even now? This past week, militants boarded a bus in Kenya and demanded all the Muslims disembark, leaving only the Christians behind. Staring down the barrel of assault weapons, the Muslim passengers refused to move. Women passed female Christians their headscarves, and one man is quoted as saying, "If you want to kill us, kill us. There are no Christians here." And in the darkness, a glimmer of light. A few days before Christmas, unable to afford a trip home, 27-year-old Sally Smith posted on Craigslist, "Want to volunteer with me on Christmas in DC?" Suddenly, her inbox was flooded with responses from complete strangers. People who, rather than feasting on decadent meals and swapping expensive presents, wanted to do something meaningful for others. By Christmas Day, dozens upon dozens of people who did not know each other were meeting at sites across the district, visiting disabled veterans, and distributing warm clothes and blankets to the homeless. And in the darkness, a glimmer of light. After Jerry Falwell Jr., president of Liberty University, issued a call to all his students to arm themselves, John Piper, one of the foremost voices of conservative evangelicalism today, and a man whose views of Christianity are often strongly at odds with my own, penned an article denouncing Falwell. Putting himself in the politically challenging position of disagreeing with someone on his side of the culture wars, Piper argued that the attitude of, "I have the power to kill you in my pocket, so don't mess with me," is completely incompatible with the whole tenor and focus and demeanor and heart attitude of the Christian life. And in the darkness, a glimmer of light. In response to announcements that the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency will be expanding deportations, faith leaders across the country have come out committing their houses of worship to providing sanctuary. And in the darkness, a glimmer of light. And when 8-year-old Sophia, a Muslim girl in Dallas, Texas, heard the hate-filled speech of some coming across her TV and became so terrified that she packed a bag of all her favorite possessions and started going around the house checking the locks, convinced she was about to be deported, thousands of U.S. veterans and soldiers began sending her messages of hope using the hashtag, "I will protect you." Their messages read, "I raised my right hand in service and protection, both in uniform and out. Dear little Sophia, I will protect you. Are you a Muslim in America and afraid because of your religion? Do not be afraid. I will protect you. Sophia, you are the reason I serve. I will protect you." And in the darkness, a glimmer of light. What flesh other than our own can the word be born in today? I sometimes wonder if the reason we speak so much about the darkness is not because there is not light, but because we are failing to perceive it. Some may say in the midst of so much going wrong in the world, these instances of hope are too small to amount to very much. I mean, surely as something as tiny as a tweet or a Craigslist post can't really have significance in this big, complicated world of ours. Surely the birth of a child bears no weight on the galaxies swirling far beyond our sight. And along with the world, we may be tempted to dismiss small rays of light as being too insignificant, too faint. Perhaps that's why our gospel prologue includes reference to one other man, a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. What if this is our role too? The God who was in the beginning is the God who walks among us even now, wearing the faces of our soldiers and Muslim refugees and the next-door neighbor we've yet to meet. Plenty of people in the world will testify to the darkness. Plenty will deny the presence of God among us. They will say the birth of a child is another unremarkable event. But we know it is a moment on which all of time hangs. And so it is up to us to testify to the light. And when we do, when we witness to the grace we have received and the God who walks among us, then the light will shine in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. Amen.